In the cabin of the night minibus, absolutely everyone was asleep except for the two of us. I was clutching a crumpled ticket to Paris in my hands, having no idea that the girl in the next seat, in exactly 2 years, would become my wife. And it all started on a desolate highway in the middle of the night, when our vehicle almost flew off the road in complete darkness. Pause. The bus station in Kraków bid us farewell with a cold drizzle. It was 11 in the evening. The majestic Wawel Castle vanished into the thick fog behind us. The white Mercedes minibus rumbled quietly and pulled out onto the highway, heading toward the German border. Ahead lay more than 1,500 kilometers. A full day on the road. The drizzle lashed the windshield, flowing down in thin, dirty streams. The station platform emptied quickly, leaving behind the bright light of lanterns and the cozy cafes of the old city. Ahead was only the unknown. A vast, cold, and dark night unfolding before us like a long scroll of old paper. My name is Mark. I am 24. In my pocket was a 1-year contract to work for an IT company in Paris and a heap of doubts. Was this the right choice? Was I making the biggest mistake of my life? Everything I had before, friends, a familiar job, my favorite evening walks in Kraków, I left behind, beyond the foggy horizon. The new city intimidated me with its strangeness, an unfamiliar language, and the loneliness that usually awaits every emigrant in the first months. I looked at my old backpack between my feet and felt everything inside tighten with silent panic. Pause. The cabin was half empty. Sleepy passengers sat apart, trying to claim as much space as possible for the long night ride. Only in the third row there was some confusion. A girl in a green jacket was struggling to shove her large backpack onto the overhead shelf. She was short, delicate, and her load looked far too heavy and awkward. Fair hair spilled out from under her warm beanie, and her cheeks were flushed from the effort. She sighed softly, trying to make no noise so as not to draw unnecessary attention to herself. The backpack stubbornly caught its straps on the metal edge of the shelf. I stood up from my seat. I don't even know why I decided to step in right then. Usually, I try to avoid extra contact on the road, preferring to just hide behind a phone screen or headphones. But something in her helpless sigh made me act. "Let me help you," I said in Polish, assuming she was a local. But she immediately turned her head and replied in Ukrainian, with a light, very pleasant Western accent. "Oh, thank you so very much. It really is extremely heavy. It's full of books and paints." I grabbed the backpack by the bottom strap and hoisted it onto the shelf. Our eyes met for just a second. She had striking eyes, warm, greenish-gray, with a slight touch of tiredness and soft light. "I'm Yulia," she said quietly, tucking a strand of hair away, and sat by the window. "Mark," I smiled in response and took the neighboring seat across the aisle, somehow deciding not to return to my original place at the very back of the cabin. Pause. We passed Katowice and then Wrocław. The landscape outside the window finally erased itself, turning into a monotonous alternation of dark tree lines and rare road signs. All that remained was the endless black ribbon of the highway. The red taillights of heavy trucks ahead seemed like distant lighthouses in this dark ocean. The rain would die down, only to start pouring again with renewed force. The monotonous patter of drops on the roof of the minibus and the windshield lulled the cabin. Tap, 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 tap. This sound filled the entire silence, creating a special, almost hypnotic rhythm. Most of the passengers were already asleep. The elderly couple in front covered themselves with a large woolen blanket, leaning their heads against each other. A middle-aged man in the first seat snored quietly and steadily. The driver, an older man in a worn leather jacket, drove in silence. His face was illuminated only by the dim blue light of the navigator, making him look like the captain of a night ship steering his vessel through unknown waters. I couldn't sleep. Thoughts of Paris, the new job, and housing spun in my head without stopping. Yulia wasn't sleeping either. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and stared into the darkness, where the blurred lights of roadside gas stations and lonely lamps occasionally flew by. "Why Paris?" I asked suddenly in a quiet voice, trying not to speak too loudly so as not to disturb the fragile peace of the sleeping passengers. She slowly turned around. The light from the headlights of an oncoming truck swept across the cabin for a moment and fully illuminated her face, highlighting her soft features and gentle smile. "I'm going for an internship at the art academy," she replied. Yulia reached into her small bag and pulled out an old, worn-cornered notebook in a leather cover, secured with a thick elastic band. I paint, for as long as I can remember. This is my first serious trip so far from home. I want to see the Louvre with my own eyes, not just in art history textbook pictures. To feel its scale. What about you? A contract, software developer job, I shrugged. Though, to be honest, I'm incredibly scared. It feels like I'm leaving too much behind, and where I'm going, I still don't understand. She nodded understandingly, twisting the notebook in her hands. I'm scared too, very much. But my grandmother always told me one important thing. If you are truly scared to take a step forward, it means you are moving in the right direction. Staying in one place is always peaceful, but there is no life there. Pause. For some reason, those words resonated deeply within me. The tension that had held my shoulders all evening began to slowly fade. We kept talking. Our voices sounded in half whispers, blending with the hum of the engine and the rustle of wet asphalt under the wheels. We talked about the simplest and yet most important things, about childhood, about the cozy, hidden from tourists cafes of Kraków, where they brew the best cinnamon coffee, about how wet cobblestones smell after a summer downpour. Time began to lose its usual dimension. The highway under the wheels seemed not just a road, but a special space that brought us closer with every passing kilometer. It felt like we had known each other not for 2 hours, but at least several years. Somewhere near the German border, the weather took a turn for the worse. Such a thick, white fog fell onto the highway that it felt as if we had driven into a cloud. Visibility instantly dropped to just a few meters ahead. The driver noticeably tensed, gripped the wheel tighter, and slowed down almost to a crawl. Our minibus now crept slowly through this milky void, catching only rare glints of reflectors on the guardrails. It grew noticeably colder in the cabin. The old heater tried to work, but the metal sides of the bus quickly let the winter night dampness in. Passengers began to bundle up tighter in their clothes, and someone woke up and sighed in frustration. I noticed Yulia pull her shoulders in and try to hide her hands in the sleeves of her jacket. She was clearly freezing, but kept quiet, not wanting to complain or distract the driver. I unzipped my backpack and pulled out a large, thick woolen scarf of a deep navy blue color. Here, I handed it to her across the aisle. It's very warm. My grandmother knitted it herself when I was still in university. It always saved me on cold nights like this. Yulia was a bit embarrassed, her cheeks flushing again, but the cold forced her to accept the help. She took the scarf, gently wrapped it around her neck, and buried her nose in it. Thank you, Mark. You literally saved me. It really is very warm and smells like comfort. At that moment, the situation on the road changed in a fraction of a second. Ahead, a black wall suddenly loomed out of the fog. A huge tree uprooted by the night storm had fallen right ahead, blocking both lanes of the highway. The driver reacted instantly. He slammed on the brakes. The piercing screech of tires tore through the quiet cabin. We were thrown forward violently. Someone among the passengers shrieked in surprise, and small items flew off the overhead shelves. We stopped just a few centimeters from the heavy, wet-leaved branches. My heart was pounding wildly in my chest, adrenaline rushing to my head. The driver swore quietly but very bluntly in Polish, cut the engine, and stepped outside along with a man from the first row to assess the situation and try to drag the heavy trunk off the road. At that exact moment, the main lights in the cabin went out. A thick, almost tangible darkness and the absolute silence of the forest enveloped us. Only the hazard lights flashed rhythmically in amber, casting strange, long shadows on the walls and ceiling of the minibus. Flash, flash, flash. Yulia instinctively leaned across the aisle and tightly grabbed my hand. Her hand was ice cold from the chill and fright. "It's okay, Yul," I said quietly and reassuringly, intertwining my fingers with hers and gently squeezing her hand, trying to pass on some of my warmth. We stopped in time. The men will clear the branches now, and we'll keep going. I'm here. I'm right here. She didn't let go of my hand. She looked at me in this rhythmic amber light of the hazard flashers, and in her eyes, shining in the dark, I suddenly saw something more than just fear of a night mishap. I saw a deep, absolute trust. The kind of trust that sometimes takes people years to build, yet for us, It appeared in a few hours on a dark night highway. A few minutes later, the tree was moved to the shoulder. The driver got back behind the wheel, the engine rumbled quietly again, and we continued on our way. The motion of the minibus lulled the passengers back to sleep as they quickly calmed down after the unexpected jolt. Yulia still didn't let go of my hand. After a while, her head slowly rested on my shoulder. She fell asleep, exhausted from the stress. I tried to sit as still as possible. I was afraid to make even the slightest movement so as not to disturb her fragile and peaceful sleep. Her breathing was light, steady, and warm, tickling my neck. My grandmother's old woolen scarf smelled of home, but now her subtle, barely noticeable scent of lavender and freshness was added to it. At that moment, for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange, absolute peace. The unknown ahead no longer seemed so terrifying. Toward morning, as the eastern sky began to turn slightly gray, we stopped at a large gas station already in Germany. Passengers slowly began to step outside to stretch their stiff legs, wash up, and buy hot coffee. Yulia woke up too. She raised her head, stretched sweetly, and immediately blushed a little, realizing she had slept on my shoulder for several hours. "Oh, please forgive me," she whispered, fixing her messy hair. "Your shoulder must be completely numb." "It's fine, honestly. It was very comfortable and warm," I replied with absolute sincerity. She smiled, gathered her things, and walked toward the gas station market. I remained in the cabin alone. Turning to her seat, I noticed that the leather notebook was left lying on the gray upholstery. It must have fallen out of her jacket pocket when she was getting ready to leave. I reached out to pick it up and keep it safe until she returned. I had no intention of looking inside. That would be an invasion of her privacy. But the notebook fell in such a way that it opened right to the last, fresh page. My eyes instinctively caught the drawing. My breath literally caught. On the thick white paper was a fresh pencil sketch. Quick, light, but incredibly precise strokes. The window of our minibus, with a thick night fog rolling outside and the silhouettes of trees visible. And my profile. I was drawn exactly as I had sat for most of the night, head slightly tilted, looking at the road through the glass. Every line breathed a special warmth. And in the very corner of the page in tiny, neat handwriting was the date, time, and just one letter. Night. The road to Paris. M. She was drawing me. The whole time I thought she was just staring at the empty highway or sleeping. My heart pounded in my chest as if I had just run a marathon. I carefully closed the notebook and placed it back on her seat, trying to steady my breathing before she returned. Pause. We entered Paris the following evening. The sun was already slowly setting below the horizon, painting the sky over the French capital in incredible shades of pink, deep peach, and molten gold. The majestic Parisian suburbs welcomed us with the noise of a huge metropolis, sirens, traffic jams, and the first evening lights lighting up on the streets. Our white minibus slowly parked near the platform of the Gare de l'Est. Passengers began to bustle, grab their suitcases, say goodbye, and rush off to their business. Each of them had their own destination, their own shelter in this vast city. We stepped out onto the platform among the very last. A relentless crowd of people bustled around us. Passers-by talked loudly in French, ran to the metro, pushed. The two of us stood in the middle of this chaos, holding our bags and feeling completely lost in a new world. "Well, here we are," Yulia said quietly. Her voice sounded a bit sad, with a hint of slight regret that this long journey had come to an end. She gently took off my blue scarf and handed it to me. "Thank you for everything, Mark. For the help, the conversations, and for the warm scarf. You really made this difficult night easier for me." I took the scarf, but I was in no hurry to put it in my backpack. I looked into her greenish-gray eyes and realized that if I just turned around and walked into the crowd now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Every step I took in this city would be poisoned by the thought that I had let my destiny walk away. "Yulia," I said, feeling my throat tighten with nerves, the words coming with difficulty. "I don't want our journey to just end on this dirty station platform. Let's have coffee tomorrow evening, here in Paris. I know a very cozy spot on the Ile de la Cité, right by the Seine. They make great croissants and brew coffee that's just as good as in our Krakow." For a moment, She raised her eyebrows in surprise, her gaze becoming incredibly soft. And then her face lit up with that same wonderful smile I'd first seen back at the station in Krakow. "I was beginning to think you'd never ask," she replied quietly, pulling out her phone. "Write down my number." Pause. Exactly 2 years have passed. Today is a warm, sunny September day. I'm standing near the entrance of a small, flower-decorated chapel in the suburbs of Paris. I'm wearing a classic suit and my fingers are trembling slightly with excitement, exactly the same way they did on that distant night in the foggy minibus on the German highway. Around me, I can hear the laughter of friends, congratulations, and light music. The heavy wooden doors slowly open. Yulia enters. She looks incredible in her simple yet stunningly elegant white dress. In her hands is a small bouquet of white anemones, and a thin lace veil adorns her hair. She takes her first steps toward me, and I see those same greenish-gray eyes once again, the ones that captured my heart forever. Pause. There, in the very first row of guest seats, next to my parents, lies a very special object. My grandmother's old, slightly worn woolen scarf, and on top of it is Yulia's leather notebook, open to the first page, where that same quick pencil sketch, made in the dark of the night cabin, is still preserved. We have traveled a long and difficult road, from Krakow to Paris, and from completely random strangers to a single happy destiny for two. Pause. Whenever you feel like another trip is just a boring, exhausting waste of time on the road, look around. Look at the people sitting next to you, perhaps on the neighboring seat, with her head resting against the cold glass. Your destiny is napping right now. You just need to gather the courage and help her hoist a heavy backpack onto the overhead shelf. Short pause. Don't be afraid to take your first steps. They always lead to where true happiness awaits you.